The alarm scream tore through every corridor of the carrier, like a beast waking from sleep. Commander Sarah Mitchell's coffee hit the deck before her boots did. 6 contacts. 6 Russian warships materializing on the radar screens, as if the ocean itself had birthed them fully armed and hungry. Battle stations. This is not a drill. The words crackled through speakers, and the ship transformed. Men and women who'd been joking over breakfast minutes ago now sprinted through narrow passageways. Their faces hardened into masks of concentration. In the Combat Information Center, every screen erupted in crimson warnings that painted the room in hellish light. 28 nautical miles. That's all the ocean that separated peace from catastrophe. Mitchell pressed her palms against the chart table, feeling the vibration of the carrier's engines through the steel. On the tactical display, 6 red arrows converged on their position, like fingers closing into a fist. This wasn't a patrol. This wasn't coincidence. The Russian ships were executing a textbook encirclement pattern, the kind you practiced in war games, hoping you'd never see it play out for real. "They're boxing us in, ma'am." Lieutenant Chun's voice was steady, but his knuckles were white against his console. The 5-inch gun mounts rotated with mechanical precision, their barrels rising like accusing fingers. Below deck, ammunition handlers yanked open lockers with shaking hands, the clang of shells against metal, echoing like church bells ringing for the dead. The Phalanx CIWS systems spun up with that distinctive whine of sound that meant the ship's last-ditch defense was ready to spit out 4,000 rounds per minute if missiles appeared on the horizon. 24 miles now. The distance was bleeding away. Mitchell watched the geometry shift on screen. 2 Russian destroyers angled toward their port quarter, cutting through the water like sharks that had caught the scent of blood. 2 more spread out to starboard, their radar masts bristling with sensors that swept across the carrier's hull, measuring, calculating, building firing solutions. The final pair hung back, controlling the rear approaches, completing the trap. "Fire control radars active," Chun reported. "They're locking weapon solutions on us." That was when Mitchell felt it, that sick twist in her stomach. That came from knowing that somewhere on those Russian ships, men were staring at triggers, watching numbers tick down on screens, waiting for an order that would turn the ocean into a graveyard. "Ma'am, recommend we maintain course." Mitchell's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Weapons tight. Track all contacts. Weapons tight. Don't fire unless fired upon." It was the hardest order to give, when every instinct screamed to strike first, to eliminate the threat before it eliminated you. But firing first meant starting a war. And wars between superpowers didn't stay contained to a few ships in international waters. 20 miles. 18, 16. The Russian ships accelerated, their wakes spreading white against the dark water like battle flags unfurling. 1 destroyer surged forward at 31 knots, its bow lifting as it drove toward them with unmistakable hostile intent. Warning alarms shrieked as Russian targeting radars painted the carrier from multiple angles. They were being hunted. "Bridge to bridge hail," Mitchell ordered. Standard protocols. The radio operator's voice remained professional, controlled. "Russian naval vessels. This is United States warship. You are conducting unsafe maneuvers in international waters. Alter course immediately." Static, then silence. The Russian ships didn't respond with words. They responded by accelerating harder. 14 miles. 13, 12. In the weapons bay, a young sailor named Marcus Thompson loaded a magazine with trembling fingers. This was his first deployment. 3 months ago, he'd been worried about college exams. Now he was preparing ammunition that could kill men he'd never met, who probably had families waiting for them back home, just like he did. The carrier held steady. 22 knots, course unchanged, as if 6 enemy warships weren't converging from all directions. That stillness was deliberate, a message more powerful than any weapon. You don't scare us. You don't control us. But inside the CIC, Hearts hammered against ribs. Sweat beaded on foreheads despite the air conditioning. This was the edge of the knife, where discipline was the only thing preventing catastrophe. Then Contact Delta made its move. The Russian destroyer on the port bow suddenly cut inward, adjusting course 15 degrees directly toward the carrier's path. Not a gradual turn, an aggressive knife edge maneuver designed to force a collision. Speed climbed to 33 knots. The closest point of approach dropped catastrophically. 2 nautical miles. 1.8, 1.5. Ma'am! Chun's voice finally broke. Delta is executing aggressive intercept. Recommend immediate defensive action. Mitchell's jaw clenched. On the screens, fire control solutions updated automatically. The phalanx could engage in seconds. Missiles could be airborne before the Russian crew knew what hit them. Her finger hovered over the communications button. One word. That's all it would take. One word and the shooting would start. 1.4 miles. At this distance, mistakes became casualties. At this distance, there was no time for second chances. Launch the Seahawk, Mitchell said quietly. Show of presence. Do not engage. On the flight deck, the helicopter crew had been waiting for this moment. Rotors snapped outward. Turbines screamed. The Seahawk lifted off and dropped low over the water, flying directly toward the charging destroyer. 200 feet of altitude, cameras recording, sensors locked. The helicopter positioned itself between the threat and the carrier. A physical barrier. A human shield made of metal and courage. Then the green laser fired. The non-lethal targeting beam painted the Russian bridge windows in steady pulses. Not a weapon, but unmistakable in its meaning. This is your last warning. Russian naval vessel, the pilot transmitted. You are conducting unsafe maneuvers. Alter course immediately or face defensive action. 5 seconds. 10. The helicopter didn't move. The laser didn't stop. On both ships, fingers rested on triggers, and the world held its breath. Then the Russian destroyer's bow wake began to shorten. Speed dropped. 33 knots became 30, then 28, then 24. The collision geometry stabilized. 1.6 miles in Alden. Contact Delta reducing speed, Chun reported, unable to hide the relief in his voice. CPA holding. The Russian ship began a gradual turn outward, opening space that moments ago had been closing like jaws. The other Russian vessels responded in sequence, adjusting courses, reducing speeds, backing away from the line they'd found. They'd tested the boundaries and discovered them. They pushed until the giant showed its teeth, then retreated just enough to save face. United States naval vessel, came the Russian response finally, formal and controlled. We are conducting routine operations. We request safe separation. Mitchell allowed herself one slow breath. Maintain safe separation. Your maneuvers are being recorded. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Every radar sweep, every targeting solution, every aggressive turn had been logged and would be analyzed by intelligence officers on both sides. They'd come hunting and found prey that didn't run. That information was worth more than any missile strike. The Seahawk circled once more, then touched down with the same precision it had launched with. The carrier maintained its course, 22 knots from start to finish, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. By the time the Russian ships opened their distance to 6 miles, then 8, then 10, the immediate threat had dissolved. But everyone aboard knew the truth. They just spent 22 minutes staring into the abyss, and the abyss had blinked first. In Moscow and Washington, analysts would dissect every second of this encounter. In naval academies from Annapolis to St. Petersburg, it would become legend warning. 6 Russian ships surrounded one American carrier and discovered that some giants don't need to move to prove they're immovable. And somewhere in the middle of that vast ocean, Sarah Mitchell finally picked up her coffee mug from where it had fallen and went to file her report, knowing that the line between peace and war was sometimes measured not in weapons fired, but in weapons held in check. The water returned to glass. The radar returned to routine. But no one who lived through those 22 minutes would ever forget how close they'd come to crossing a line from which there was no return.